Did you know that Johnny Depp, the iconic actor best known as the legendary Captain Jack Sparrow, carried a heartbreaking secret for most of his life? Just moments ago, he finally summoned the courage to reveal it publicly. It's the kind of confession that makes you pause and reflect on the unseen struggles people carry, no matter how glamorous their lives may appear. You see, even the most celebrated figures, the ones we assume have it all, can be hiding the deepest wounds. Behind the fame, the red carpets, and the awards, there often lies a very human story of pain, fear, and resilience. And Johnny Depp's recent revelation might just be one of the most vulnerable, powerful, and emotional truths ever shared by a Hollywood legend. For decades, fans and journalists alike have speculated about Johnny's enigmatic nature. His quiet, almost introverted demeanor during interviews, his deep connection to the characters he portrays, his tendency to avoid the typical Hollywood spotlight. Some saw it as mystery, others saw it as eccentricity. But now, for the first time, we know the truth. It was something much deeper. What if all of that wasn't just personality, but a carefully constructed shield? A way to protect a fragile part of himself from the brutal judgment of an industry and a world that might not understand. That's what makes this moment so profound. It wasn't a grand press conference. No paparazzi, no headlines screaming for attention. Just Johnny sitting quietly at a small round table in France, discussing a personal artistic project, when one question changed everything. A journalist, speaking casually, asked, "What's something your fans still don't know about you?" There was a long silence, the kind of silence that makes everyone lean in. Not a dramatic pause, but a real, soul-searching stillness. Then, in a soft, unguarded voice, Johnny said it. "I've lived with severe dyslexia my whole life." The room froze. It was as if time itself slowed down for a second. He went on to explain how, growing up in Kentucky, reading felt like navigating a chaotic maze. Letters danced, sentences twisted into confusion. Simple instructions became impossible riddles. School became a place of dread rather than learning. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't distracted, but that's not how the world saw him. He recalled the shame, the embarrassment, the crushing feeling of being misunderstood by teachers, classmates, even family members at times. Labels like slow, stupid, and troublemaker were thrown around casually, but they stuck to his soul like scars. No one saw the battle he fought every day just to read a paragraph, to hold on to words that wouldn't sit still. But then, something saved him: acting. While others read scripts with ease, Johnny had to create a whole new way of learning. He leaned into memory, emotion, and rhythm. He would record lines, listen to them over and over, repeating until the words weren't just memorized, they were embodied. It was as if he had to feel the lines in his bones before he could perform them. To survive in an industry built on reading and reciting, Johnny created a new language for himself. Not one of ink on paper, but one of sensation, sound, and energy. He didn't cheat the process. He reinvented it, and he never told anyone. Not producers, not directors, not even close friends. Not because he wanted to deceive, but because he was protecting the fragile truth of who he really was. The world already saw him as a rebel, a rule breaker, an outsider in Hollywood's tightly controlled system. Admitting he struggled to read, that could have shattered the illusion and possibly ended his career before it truly began. So he built a mask, a charming, mysterious, magnetic persona that kept the real Johnny just out of reach. But everything started to shift when he became a father. His daughter Lily Rose became the first person he shared his truth with. She was sharp, sensitive, and saw through the walls he had spent a lifetime building. He didn't want to lie to her. He wanted to be the kind of father who showed strength through honesty, not silence. When he finally told her, expecting shame or pity, she surprised him. She was proud. She told him that vulnerability is not a flaw, it's a superpower. That his story could give strength to others who were quietly suffering too. And that moment sparked a transformation in Johnny. He began to reframe everything he once saw as a weakness. Maybe his struggle could help others. Maybe being real could be even more powerful than being perfect. He began sharing the tools and strategies he had developed over time. He talked about using color filters to ease the visual chaos on a page, listening to audio recordings while walking to absorb scripts through repetition, even handwriting entire monologues, not to read them, but to internalize them through muscle memory. These weren't shortcuts. They were lifelines, hard-earned, creative solutions that allowed him not only to survive, but to thrive in an industry that rarely slows down for anyone. Experts like Dr. Kate Wendell, a renowned neuropsychologist who works with artists and creatives, have long said that dyslexia is simply a different way the brain processes language. It doesn't mean someone is less intelligent. In fact, many with dyslexia show remarkable talent for visual thinking, storytelling, and empathy. Isn't that exactly who Johnny Depp is? Think about it. From Edward Scissorhands to Captain Jack Sparrow, from Donnie Brasco to Willy Wonka, his performances have always been layered with imagination, emotion, and originality. Now we understand why. He wasn't just reading roles, he was translating an invisible world into something we could feel. Another surprising part of his story, music. As a boy, Johnny found that rock lyrics became his reading teachers. He would sit for hours, vinyl spinning on the record player, following along with lyrics in hand. The rhythm helped him anchor the words. It made reading not just bearable, but joyful. Modern studies now support what Johnny intuitively discovered. Rhythm and music can improve timing and sequencing skills in the dyslexic brain, turning chaos into coherence. But despite all these clever techniques, Johnny confessed the emotional toll was immense. Imagine living with the constant fear that your secret would be discovered, that one slip-up could unravel everything. Even as he stood on stages, accepting awards and praise, there was always a voice in the back of his mind whispering, if only they knew. That disconnect, the one between who you are and who people think you are, is exhausting. It's a performance far more demanding than any movie role. Johnny described how hiding his dyslexia wasn't just a professional decision, it was personal survival. The film industry is fast, unforgiving, and built on precision. There's little time for accommodations. So he adapted, alone, quietly, constantly. He recalled an early memory on set, a last-minute script rewrite handed to him. While others skimmed through the new lines with ease, Johnny panicked. The words blurred. His mind raced, but he didn't let it show. He smiled, nodded, and walked away as if everything was fine. Inside, though, he was spiraling. In his trailer, he broke down the lines phonetically. One by one, he repeated them over and over until they became second nature. Then he returned to set and delivered the scene flawlessly. No one suspected a thing. And that, he said, was the tragedy. He could always hide it, but at what cost? It wasn't until years later, watching his children grow, that he truly saw the damage. He began to understand that living in fear, even silently, rewrites your self-worth. He didn't want that for his kids. He wanted them to know that struggles don't diminish us, they define us. Step by step, he began to speak out. He's not doing it for attention. He's doing it for every child who's ever stared at a page and felt like a failure. For every adult who still carries the shame of not being able to read aloud. For every creative soul who has felt broken, misunderstood, or left behind. Johnny Depp is proof that greatness isn't about being perfect. It's about being true. That moment, when Johnny Depp finally chose to peel back the carefully constructed mask he had worn for decades, didn't come easily. It was the result of a long and difficult journey. Even after achieving fame, critical acclaim, and adoration from millions, he still battled an inner voice. That persistent whisper, the one that told him he wasn't enough, never quite went away. For years, that fear held him captive. The fear that people might look at him differently if they knew the truth. That maybe they wouldn't see the same brilliant actor, the creative force, the captivating personality. But when he eventually decided to share his truth publicly, something remarkable happened. Instead of rejection, he was met with compassion. Instead of criticism, he was met with overwhelming support. People didn't turn away, they leaned in. The response wasn't silence, it was a wave of connection. Messages began pouring in from people all over the world, fans who had walked similar paths. People who had struggled through school, fought private battles with shame, or carried invisible scars for years. Suddenly, Johnny realized he had never truly been alone. And that is the beauty of vulnerability. It bridges the gap between human experiences. It reminds us that beneath all the appearances and performances, we are more alike than we think, that we all carry hidden burdens, and in sharing them, we give others permission to do the same. For Johnny Depp, a man known for transforming into larger-than-life characters, revealing his authentic self might just be the most powerful role he's ever played. He confessed one of his greatest fears was not being able to meet expectations. People often misunderstand dyslexia as simply mixing up letters or reading slowly, but it's much deeper than that. It's about chronic self-doubt. It's about the quiet shame that festers after years of being mislabeled or misunderstood. It's being told, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that you're not trying hard enough, not smart enough, not good enough. And that pain leaves lasting marks. It wasn't just the struggle to read. It was the fear of being seen as incapable. The fear of being reduced to a diagnosis, of having his talent questioned. That's what Johnny meant when he said dyslexia isn't just a learning disorder. It becomes a filter, a distorted lens through which you start to see your entire self. And when he spoke those words, there was a palpable stillness in the room. His honesty cut through the air like a razor, not in a harsh way, but with a delicate truth that left many in tears. Those present described the moment as deeply humbling, something they'd never forget. Once the video clip of that interview surfaced online, the internet responded with an outpouring of stories, powerful, emotional, and heartbreaking. Comments flooded in, not just from fans, but from students, educators, parents, and even fellow creatives. People shared how they too had struggled in silence. One woman wrote about being labeled slow her entire childhood, despite working twice as hard as her peers. A teacher described how many of her brightest, most creative students felt broken simply because they didn't learn the normal way. Others talked about the sting of being called lazy or stupid by classmates, or worse, by teachers who never looked deeper. But the comments weren't filled with resentment. They were filled with gratitude. Gratitude for Johnny's courage. Gratitude that someone as respected and celebrated as him had finally said, "Me too." It was validating. It was healing. It gave so many people a voice, people who had buried their own stories for years. One commenter wrote, "For the first time, I feel proud of who I am. I don't feel defective anymore." Another said, "My son has dyslexia, and he thought he was broken. I showed him Johnny's story, and his eyes lit up with hope." That's the ripple effect of vulnerability. When someone we admire opens up, it creates space for the rest of us to show up too. Flawed, but whole. Johnny didn't come with a rehearsed motivational speech. He didn't sugarcoat his journey. He spoke from his own lived experience, raw, imperfect, and deeply human. And that's why it resonated. Because it wasn't just about him. It was about all of us. And he didn't stop with his story. He turned it into a mission. In that same interview, Johnny voiced a plea, especially for educators and parents. He said if only he had been diagnosed properly and supported instead of judged and misunderstood, his life as a child could have been so different. He called for a change in how we view learning differences. He said, "We need to stop making kids feel broken for learning differently, because once they believe that, it's incredibly hard to unlearn." He wasn't just talking to students. He was speaking to a system that still doesn't fully understand how to support those who process the world differently. And he made it clear, different doesn't mean less. In fact, being different can be your greatest strength, your superpower. Johnny's message joins a growing chorus of voices, people like Richard Branson, Whoopi Goldberg, and Steven Spielberg, who have shared their own struggles with dyslexia. But hearing it from Johnny Depp, an artist whose career depends on written words, carries a uniquely powerful weight. He's not trying to sell a book or lead a movement. He's simply showing up as himself, unfiltered, honest, and finally, free from the burden of secrecy. So now that the truth is out, what's next? Maybe this marks the beginning of a new chapter in Johnny's life, one where he continues to use his platform to advocate for those who feel unseen, one where he doesn't have to hide behind mystery or mystique, one where he connects not through characters, but through shared truth. And fans are responding with overwhelming support. There's something incredibly moving about seeing someone you've admired for years reveal that they too are human, that they have scars, that they've struggled in silence. If Johnny Depp's story touched something in you, if it stirred emotions, memories, or even a sense of relief, then maybe it's time to ask yourself, what truth are you holding back? Maybe you know someone, maybe a loved one, a child, or even yourself, who has been carrying a silent burden. What if you decided to stop hiding? What if your story, like Johnny's, could be the light someone else needs? Because sometimes the bravest thing can do isn't pretending to have it all together. It's admitting that we're still figuring it out. Let's keep this conversation alive. What's something you once felt ashamed of but have now learned to embrace? What tools or mindsets helped you shift that perspective? Drop your thoughts in the comments. You never know who needs to hear exactly what you have to say. And if this video moved you, stay tuned. Because in our next story, we're diving into a side of Johnny Depp the media rarely shows. We'll explore how his demeanor during the court battles changed and what was really going on behind those headlines. The link is waiting for you right here. If you found comfort in this story, give it a like. Maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Tap that bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the stories that shape us, they deserve to be heard. Thanks for spending this time with me. I'm truly glad you're here. See you in the next one.